All right, Bobby, yesterday we broke down 5 of the conference title games, and today we deep dive into the American, the MAC, the Big 12, and the Big 10. If you want to hear the deep dive on the other conferences, just click back on yesterday's show. We'll start tonight's show with the American. North Texas traveling to Tulane. North Texas currently the short road favorite, laying the 2.5 with a total of 66. This is a battle of 2 coaches that won't be here next year. So one of these guys, either Eric Morris or John Summerall, they're going to continue with one of these teams, potentially being the 11 seed. If Duke does beat Virginia, they will be not the 12 seed, but the 11 seed. If you've been sleeping on the American, you've missed one of the best offenses in college football. North Texas has averaged over 50 points in 5 of the last 6 games. And they're going to be facing a Tulane defense that's pretty much top 30. So, Bobby, can Tulane get stops, or is North Texas going to continue to score?
Yep, and just to add to the coaching note, both coaches staying through their playoff run, for the winner here, and I think that's huge for both teams. I do think there's maybe a slight edge to John Summerall, who went through this interview for the UNC job last year, but largely not a huge effect because it's neutral on the game situation. I think this game, though, hinges on the Tulane offense, and specifically quarterback Jake Retzlaff, the transfer from BYU. He's not only the team's leading passer, but also the leading rusher, basically splitting carries and season-long numbers with running back Javin Gordon and the rest of the running backs. Since the Memphis game, where afterwards Retzlaff appeared on the injury report, we've seen carries plummet for him. 16 rush attempts, which include sacks, obviously, for a combined 5 yards in the last 3 games against FAU, Temple, and Charlotte, and mostly using him near the goal line because those 4 rush TDs still in those games. The Green Wave have been ineffective on the ground with their backs, generating no explosives, just an average success rate facing a North Texas defense, ranked in the 130s in EPA and success rate rush defense themselves. They can be got there. While the trenches aren't what they were a few years ago, Tulane's had a huge trench edge typically in the American. And even if they're a poor rush number, that's not because of their offensive line. It's because of the opportunity rate and line yards. They're still an average team in that regard. Tulane's passing attack is unique. 4 receivers, over 30 catches this year, although one of them, Bohaman, is questionable in this game. But they spread the ball around, look to take advantages with matchups on the outside. Tulane is a top 25 passing game in terms of EPA and success. And unlike North Texas rush D, the North Texas pass D is not a sieve and ranks as a top 40 unit. Where the Mean Green make their hay is behind an offense of young studs, freshman Drew Mestmaker at quarterback, running back Caleb Hawkins, sophomore wide receiver Wyatt Young. Number 1 in success rate, number 8 in EPA per play. They are likely to have success in the passing game, where Tulane gets taken advantage of quite a bit in the secondary. But here's the thing here is they make you more methodical outside of the top 90 in terms of passing success rate defense, but top 3rd in defending pass explosives. I think it's to Tulane's advantage to continue that bend and break style because while they're below average pace, the Mean Green offense keep the Mean Green offense on the sidelines, limit possessions, especially when they get the ground game going against that weak North Texas rush defense. We mentioned some soft openers on Sunday night. Soft threes on Tulane were taken out. My gut I don't know if threes reappear. I don't think so. But we have seen North Texas take big game day money a couple times this year. Last week versus Temple, I know the game against USF that they actually lost is another one. If this game gets back to 3, I do think Tulane is worth something in terms of a bet, but not one I'm rushing to necessarily place here. The total is more interesting to me. Total got bet up initially to 67.5 on the open, taking a tick back of under money to 66. I actually like the under in this game with 2 scary offenses. I think we're going to see some drives that are more methodical. Tulane is that way with lacking explosives, and then the Tulane defense also plays to that style as well. So longer scoring drives, lack of instant points, lean under 66 in this game.
We have seen North Texas not score a lot of points, namely the Navy game. That was one that really they
obviously Navy controls the pace too. Yeah,
absolutely.
31-17 was that final, I believe.
Just supporting your case, that obviously there are games that North Texas had played similar styles that certainly support an under when a total is certainly listed this high.
Right.
Moving on to the Big 12 championship game. BYU and Texas Tech. The Cougars currently catching 13 points in Jerry World against a Texas Tech team they played less than 30 days ago. Texas Tech's defense is led by RG3's Heisman favorite, Jacob Rodriguez. Oh, God, I got a giggle out of you on that one. BYU was held to just 255 yards. This game finished, I think the final score was 26-7 or 29-7. It could have been a lot worse. But as we saw in previous games like Texas Tech Houston, Texas Tech had to settle for a lot of field goals. And that's been a problem all year long with Tech. They not all the time will they punch in those red zone drives. So, Bobby, we got a rematch here on the fast track in the Dome. Can BYU hang within this number?
Yep, and remember yesterday we did bet best bet under 49.5 in this game yesterday. Yep. And you kind of mentioned it. First meeting 29-7 was the final there. The Tech, yes, that could have been way worse in terms of the margin Tech had, but again, we've shown concern about Texas Tech's offensive efficiency. They're 7 of 18 on third down in that one. They kicked multiple field goals on short drives after BYU turnovers. That strong BYU ground attack that they've relied on all year. LJ Martin had 35 yards individually. They had 67 as a team. The much talked about Texas Tech D-line is elite, led by David Bailey. They have quite an advantage here, as like they've had against all Big 12 foes, where BYU, primarily a ground-based attack, bottom third at offensive line yards created by the offensive line. It's been Martin as the primary driver of that ground game. And unless BYU is able to pop an explosive on the ground or two, I don't see them having the down-to-town success needed to put up enough points on Texas Tech to hang around in this game. And they really don't have the difference makers on the outside to potentially take advantage of a Tech secondary that I'm still, quite frankly, waiting to be tested. BYU is going to need Bachmeier to be a difference maker in the passing game here. For Texas Tech, they ran the ball well against BYU in the first meeting, with Cameron Dickey and Jacoby Williams combining for nearly 200 yards on the ground. Baron Morton is where the inefficiency came from, 7 to 32 in that game, just failing to connect with his receivers. Tech offense is actually 78th, middle of the pack in terms of offensive success rate. They continue to feast on that late down success, that kind of gap I've talked about a few times with the Red Raiders. Top third downs conversions, bottom 15 in average third down distance, meaning you're facing a ton of third and longs, and they are converting them. As the aforementioned in this game, Texas Tech closed in Lubbock. It opened 9.5, 10 in that game. Got steamed up to where it is now, minus 13, 13.5. Now, that game was in Lubbock. Now we're sitting here on a neutral. I do think fair in this game is probably 14-ish. But I'm still not sold on the Tech offenses against defenses and defense coordinators like Jay Hill that I respect. So the total was bet down from 52.5 to 49.5 in the first game. And this is where we sit here on a faster track. Circa actually opened this a bit lower initially, right at the 49.5. And then other over the course of the week, everyone's come down to the Circa number in this one. I still think under money could still come, which is why we best bet it yesterday. But yeah, I think that's my favorite play in the game. Under 49.5, BYU team total under. If you can get like a 20, if that's out there. I don't think it is a last check, but if that comes at any point in the week, I think that's a great look. I don't think BYU scores in this game, and a Texas Tech win.
The MAC championship played in the Motor City at Ford Field, the Detroit Lions Stadium. Miami of Ohio currently getting 2 points with a total of 43.5. Bobby, if you remember this game, I can't remember if this was a best bet for us or just a bet that you and I really talked a lot about, but we got hosed in the fourth quarter of this one because that's where Miami went on a late scoring surge. They scored 17 points in the last 10 minutes, and they held Western Michigan to only 3 points in that second half. This game lying kind of similarly. Obviously, there's been a change at quarterback for Miami of Ohio. But, Bobby, this is the lowest total game on conference championship week. So what are your thoughts here, side and total?
Yep, so we'll start. Daquan Finn, quarterback for Miami of Ohio. He left the program 2 weeks ago to focus on his pro career. That's probably non-existent. But
there's always the CFL, right?
Yeah, that was quite puzzling. Makes me think something else is going on there. But it's freshman Thomas Gakowski, who played the last 2 games of the season against Buffalo and Ball State. just over 50% completions, but 4 touchdowns and 0 picks in those wins. Certainly a different task against a Western Michigan defensive front that specializes in their ability to rush the passer and is also one of the best units in the group of 5. We talked about that unit a few times this year on the show. Top 40 is the Broncos defense and overall success rate, 30th against the pass, just top 60 against the run. That run defense is going to be tested here against Miami here, and I expect, and like most Chuck Martin teams do, Jordan Brunson leads their ground attack 90 yards on 13 carries in the first meeting. Miami held Western Michigan to 0 sacks in that meeting, with a mix of offensive line and Finn's mobility getting credit for that. Luckily for Miami, Gutskowski, he's not a complete statue. 70 yards, 15 carries, obviously some of those couple sacks in that in his 2 starts. And he's likely going to have to be ready and prepared to process a bit faster because that pass rush and make good decisions. And that's going to be a key to the game for them on the Miami side. For Western, we have another ground-based attack here around dual threat quarterback Brock Lowry. Led the team in rushing attempts, yards, and touchdowns in addition to his passing responsibilities. This offense isn't dynamic really at all. They won't create explosives. They rely on being top 25 in success rate on the ground because their passing game is outside the top 100 in just about everything. Additionally, similar to Miami, they have a great run blocking offensive line, or better run blocking offensive line than pass blocking offensive line, I should say. And that matters a lot because the Red Hawks also have a really good pass rush as well. And they got to Lowry 3 times in that meeting on October 25th. Now, another factor in this game is probably going to be the kicking game. Western Michigan, 11 of 17 on field goals this year. Miami, consistently top 10 in special teams for many years under Chuck Martin, 19 to 21 in the season. The game closed -2.5 and 40.5 in the first meeting in Oxford, which is Miami, Ohio's home field, by the way. The game was decided by 17 fourth quarter points by Miami, Ohio in a 26-17 victory. Most openers here were Western Michigan -2.5 in this one, obviously an adjustment for the home field and the quarterback information that we gave out earlier. There was a sprinkle of +3 in that promptly got taken out. A little more of my Miami money showed that there was some 1.5s and some sharper shops like circa earlier in the day. My number in this game is Western Michigan -1.79. So I'm like right on market here. So I have really no take as far as the side goes. The total, once again, is something where I think we're going to see the clock churn. We obviously have Miami with a freshman quarterback, a really conservative coach. And despite this being indoors at Ford Field, I don't think this total should be adjusted up from the first meeting. Miami's season long is 56% favored to the run. With Gutskowski at quarterback, this has gone to over 60% in both their games. And Western Michigan's already a 60% run team. So I like under 43.5 in this game, but I'm probably going to split that with first half under 21.5 as well.
Our final big game breakdown of this conference championship week, the biggest of the big games. Undefeated Indiana taking on undefeated Ohio State. Indiana currently a 4-point dog. That's down from 5.5 on the open. The total is, I'll call it right now 48, but it looks like we're headed towards 47.5. Bobby, Indiana is now back in the underdog role, and that's been a departure from that role since the Oregon game. They've been on multi-touchdown favorite status, and for most games covered since that Oregon game, but they proved a lot in that Oregon game. That's probably the best data point we have of both of these teams. Ohio State not played much relevant competition, and they've certainly acted like it. Their pace of play is obviously very slow, and they've kept everyone fresh and healthy for big games like this. So with that in mind, does Ohio State maintain their Death Star status in this one? Do they go and beat the brakes off of Indiana? Or do we finally see some chinks in the Buckeye armor?
Yeah, obviously another test for Indiana here as they continue their program ascent under Kirsten Eddy, and they get to go against the Buckeyes here,
right.
The defending national championship, the number one team in the nation. I talked last week and a few times about how unique Ohio State's team profile was. As quite frankly, I just find it really fascinating being dead last seconds per play, covering all but one game this season, and 8-4 in total to the under on these games as well. So yes, the Ohio State offense has been incredibly efficient with the limited possessions, limited number of plays. The defense is yet to allow 17 points yet this season.
Right.
Last year during Indiana's initial pop, they were beat up front, specifically on the offensive line when they stepped up in class against the Buckeyes and Notre Dame, the 2 games they lost a season ago. IU's offensive line has allowed 15 sacks this year, including 3 against Penn State, 2 against Iowa, 1 against Oregon. That's some of the better defensive lines they faced this season, obviously. Indiana's going to have to rely on that offensive line to keep their Heisman candidate, Fernando Mendoza, clean, while he also is able to use his mobility to extend plays, get some extra yards in the run game, and help extend plays for the receivers. Indiana does not get enough credit for the 2 receivers. They have Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt. It's a big test for them. They're obviously going against very good Buckeyes secondary. They were very good versus Oregon, who obviously has had a capacity that we've noted a couple times, like, hey, they haven't been tested other than when they played Indiana. Indiana's receivers kind of got them. They're an immensely underrated duo in college football, and I just want to give them credit for that here. In terms of the ground game, I thought Michigan showed they had something running. I'm not a huge scheme X's and O's guy, but they had something off tackle, all of Michigan's bigger runs in that game. They were kind of in the same format. They were kind of in that off tackle. I think it was the way they were blocking it. I wonder if IU sees that and tries to use that to try to get some explosives there, as they're more likely to convert those plays into touchdowns than the hapless Wolverines are. For the Buckeyes offense, I think Tate and Smith were just fine coming off those injuries versus Michigan. They played well, both scoring touchdowns. And we finally saw freshman running back Bo Jackson truly emerge. First game he had this year with 20 carries. He's fresh, obviously coming into this one, splitting time with the other Buckeye backs all season. And is clearly the number one option. He's going to be very good in future years. But back to the Buckeyes passing game. Obviously, Tate and Smith individually will be the best receivers that IU's faced all season. They have some great, Pond's the great corner as well for IU, but you can only follow one of those guys. It's a huge test here. Julian Sand has been kept clean all year, just 6 sacks, and honestly hasn't even been pressured outside of the Texas game, which was his first career start. Indiana also has a good pass rush, and it's going to be vital here that they get home, because if Ohio State can stay on schedule, they've proven that they can choke you out. I mentioned Ohio State's pace of play from the start, dead last. Indiana's 125th, so not that much faster. The total hasn't moved, basically right around 48. You kind of noted it's kind of tipping a little bit down. Hate to be cliche, but I think with the pacing here, Ohio State's defense being the best unit on the field, I do lean under here at current 40. I think 46.5, flat 47 is probably the better number to me. Although these are the best offenses both teams have played as well. I do want to make sure to give credit here where that is due. But I think the real angle in this, I think, is taking the first half under 23.5. That's going to be the angle to look to bet as far as the total goes, while these teams try to feel each other out. In terms of the side, came out as an open around 5.5, briefly touching 6. Obviously, some Hoosier money has come in. I know in a lot of publicly available models, Kelly Ford's one of them. He actually has IU favored. I heard someone else have Ohio State -1.5 in this game. I still think there's a talent gap here. And Ohio State hasn't pushed this Death Star button that you kind of mentioned at the top of the breakdown just fully yet. I like Ohio State. I think the full flat 4s that are available here, I do think it's as low as it can go. Honestly, I think the Buckeyes are a bet here. I think this should be a little bit closer to 6. So I bet Ohio State at the -4 and lean to the first half under.
In your opinion, how much of those public models do you think are helping drive this market movement? I say that because I enjoy Ed Fang's emails and newsletter, and he touched on it on his model and just saying, hey, the kind of these garbage games that Indiana has played has moved his math model to make, I think he has Indiana as a 1-point dog, but he acknowledges that. Whereas Kelly Ford obviously is just hey, it is what it is.
Yeah.
With that in mind, knowing that some of these math models are helping, do you think some of the math models are helping drive this Indiana money that we've seen? And do you think this game stops at 4? Where do you think this game closes?
That's hard to say because of this push-pull. I do think that this is a part of kind of the art and sciences in terms of overall handicapping. I think what Ed's model and Kelly Ford, who we've already mentioned, I think they have a lot of science in that model. Yeah. And I think when looking at, I think you have to have both components of that and to make a number, and blending those two things a little bit. So yes, like if I were to take out just stats and all that stuff, yeah, I'd probably make this game a little bit closer in terms of a number. But I think when you add in some of the art to it, considering who teams have played all year, and
how
how to
they
factor
played.
out garbage.
It's really how Ohio State has played.
Yeah.
They have not pressed the gas intentionally,
Right.
masking, which would
Right.
artificially deflate their math numbers.
Right. Yeah. So and obviously like Indiana, talked about some of the run, score running up the last couple of years. Now they haven't done that as much this year, but that does affect things quite a bit. So I think some of that's in that, and it just kind of depends on when you take out and begin factoring out garbage time. Quite frankly, when do you consider a game? I always call it some of these games like fake games, right? So like it's when you consider a game. When is a game no longer a game? And it's just we agree the game is over. You've won, but there's still time up there. We have to finish it out.
Right.
So I just think it's when you consider that, and how you get there is going to be the difference there. I could totally see some of the math groups taking this down maybe to a flat 3 or to maybe, to where 3.5 or something shows. I don't think it can ever actually touch flat 3 because I think that would last milliseconds. So maybe 3.5 is like the true floor, but I do think those would get bet as well, to where 4 is basically near the bottom. It probably closes in this range. I'll say between 3.5 and 4.5 is probably where this market will close.
Before we move on to best bets for tonight, guys, please click that like and subscribe button if you're on YouTube. If you are listening on Spotify, go ahead and click that 5-star button. It does help the algorithm know that this is quality betting content. And I shared with Bobby today all of our unwrapped, cool Spotify stuff they send you. And our little podcast is doing a great job because of, listeners like you guys. So thank you guys so much for the support. Bobby, we had a best bet Sunday night. It was Duke UVA over 57.5. We had a best bet last night. We've revisited today. Texas Tech BYU under 49.5. We're going to play a team total on a game we discussed yesterday. Kennesaw State over 30.5.
Yep, and we're going to grade this one at -120. Wanted to give it out yesterday, but I didn't think team totals were available enough. A prominent offshore posted them today. They're up at DraftKings, FanDuel. MGM has them. A couple, lots of other places on the screen. So I thought 120 was fair enough since we're not having another show the rest of the week. You can go back and listen to the breakdown yesterday. Really liked the Kennesaw State offense. Thought they left a lot of points on the board in the first meeting, and they scored 26. I think they're the better team and better side there. So yeah, Kennesaw State team total over 30.5. And like I said, we'll grade that at -120 there. And for the second best bet,
I did have a question for you on Kennesaw State. Now that you've had additional time to think about Tulane and North Texas, are you still favorable on that 10-1 bet that you mentioned yesterday, with the Kennesaw game being the highest scoring game of the weekend?
It wasn't the highest scoring game. Kennesaw being it was the highest scoring team. I'm checking right now.
Excuse me.
No, specifically was at Caesars. I would shop this around. It was the only place I've seen it as of yesterday. I have not looked today. Transparency on this. It is still 10-1 there. But yeah, North Texas plus 190 in that market. Tulane plus 350. Obviously, that makes sense. North Texas being favored in that game. Total of 66. I agree with those two teams being ahead of Kennesaw here. But we mentioned we like the under 49.5 in Texas Tech BYU. I don't like the North Texas offense as far as down-to-down success. They're plus 450 in this market. I think Kennesaw should be priced right on them. And then James Madison, I respect the Troy defense enough. I do think James Madison can score points and get margin in that game, but I think they're going to be in the high 30s. I think you have to be low to mid 40s to win this bet. And I think Kennesaw has the clearest pathway to get there. We mentioned North Texas and Tulane, where we kind of like the under because we think we could see a ton of long drives there. Kennesaw is explosive. So I do think that 10-1 on that's available at Caesars is worth a few shekels, if you will.
Second best bet of the night, Ohio State laying the 4.
Yep, right where the last game breakdown went. Ohio State minus the 4. Kind of mentioned it there a little bit. I do think there's still a talent gap here. I think it's part of the art and science here. I don't know if this one closes well. We try to give us bets that close well here, but I do think we've kind of reached the bottom of the Ohio State market. I think they win this game by 6, 7, somewhere in that range. I'm not calling for Ohio State by 2 touchdowns or anything like that. Indiana is a very good team, but I'm very confident Ohio State winning this game by about a touchdown.
You can follow Bobby at Bobby Digital 2 on Twitter. You can follow the show at CFB900, and you're going to want to follow the show because Bobby and I have a special show planned on Sunday. Time is currently TBD, but we want to react as fast as possible when the playoffs, the spreads, and the totals come out for playoffs, which should be Sunday when the bracket's announced, noon Eastern time, 11 Central. So we'll be on the lookout for when we think maybe FanDuel will post some numbers, and we will certainly have a showtime announced on Twitter. Hopefully by Friday, we'll have something maybe Friday around lunch about when we will go live on Sunday. Until then, enjoy Conference Championship Week. Hope to get to the windows with some of these best bets. Wishing you the absolute best of luck. Adios.